Hi everyone, welcome to this video of InDesign and using InDesign to create beautiful architecture portfolios. I'm sure by now you've seen some amazing examples of different types of themes and the different ways you can use consistency to create and construct visual narrative, and this week we'll talk about how to achieve that precisely using Adobe InDesign. Now I want to show you two key factors of Adobe InDesign and the main reasons why we use this over any other industry leading software. The big one for me is the live update tool. Now say for example I have this perspective here and the spread, but I decide I actually wanted the nighttime version of the image. I can right click in here, open with Adobe Photoshop, and it will take me over to the Photoshop file. I then change the sky, save that file, jump back over into InDesign, and you'll see it's automatically updated that file for me. Very, very powerful tool. If I did the opposite, I jumped back in here and decided that actually I preferred the daytime sky, save it again, jump back over here, and I can go to my links, right tab click, update link, and we see that it achieved the same thing. So we can do it either way. We can either go from InDesign out and edit, or if we were editing based on some feedback that we got from our lecturer or our own self-critique, do some editing and go back and update the live links, and everything will already be in there. The reason why this is important is because once you've set out your spread, once you've put this image on the page, you never ever have to set it again. That's it. Once it's there, it is there forever. It doesn't matter how many updates you do, it's always going to be there, and it's always going to remember the crop settings. So if you've cropped this in a certain way, whatever it is, doesn't matter what you do to it, it's always going to be live. So this is just going to save you so much time, and instead of you resetting your spreadsheet over and over again, the other thing that is so powerful about InDesign is that once you've got a few spreads, so for me my consistent graphic layout is that I have a full bleed on one side and then white space in the other, which you can see again here, full bleed, white space, and then some banding to break up, which we'll talk about in a sec. But once I've got that, I can just go over to my pages, copy that spread, and then drag and drop some other imagery into there, so that we wanted just this image here or something like that. It's already ready to go. If we wanted, instead of this one here, we drag and drop because we've already set out that for our layer. It's already automatically going to crop it to the size that we have there. So even if I had something more like this or like this, you can drag and drop anything into that area and it's going to automatically fill that zone there. So once we have our layout set out, all we need to do is drag and drop, and it's going to consistently use these same layouts that we have. It is a very powerful tool. So we're going to do a few things now. We're going to make a cover page, a contents page, and a basic spread like this. Copy it over and change it up, and then add a few things in and out to talk about the banding technique. How to check our links and save InDesign. So let's go for it. Command N or Control N to start a new document, and then of course we're working in millimeters, so we are 420 by 297. That's our A3 sheet. Yes, we want it facing pages because we want to be able to see our spread side by side like this, and only need one page for now because remember we're going to use the copy pages technique to make our lives a whole lot faster, so don't worry about filling out 60 pages. Just put in one for now. Alright, first thing we'll see when we open our InDesign documents, it's very similar workspace to Photoshop and Illustrator. We've got some tools over here on the left, some properties at the top, and some other properties and pages panels over here. So instead of working layers, we're now working in pages. These are the specific pages we're going to be printing, and or putting into our A3 book, the first thing I like to do is turn off the guides so that I can see exactly what I'm doing. So I've got this pink purple line here. If I do a command colon, it's going to turn that off, and you see I can toggle it back on again if I want to, but I want to hide it for now so that I can just see my A3 page. Then what I want to do is I'm going to set out my text. So I'm going to choose a font family and see what I mean by that in just a sec. Let's put some text in here first. First word is portfolio. Next is Viscom, Western Sydney University, architecture, Caddy Ross. Alright, so now I want to center that, so come over here and center it. I want to make portfolio bigger. I'm just changing and editing the font. I'm going to change the size of the portfolio. I'm just like making the text below a little bit smaller, so I give it some hierarchy. The font family we're using, you can see I'm using Future, a book. I can go all the way from a very, very light text all the way to a very, very heavy text, but it's all consistent within the same theme. It's the same family, and remember, consistency is a key in our graphic presentation because it means we can focus on the architecture. Not only are other things that are constantly changing around us, so we do want to have consistency. I'm going to make this light. Actually, let's go ahead and make that a medium. There we go, that looks pretty nice. Now InDesign is amazing, clever, and how it automatically finds a center point for you. So if I hover over the pink line, it's going to show up here, and then I know that I'm centered in the page. If I drag up the page to there, nice and tight to the text, hold shift, bring it down. Now I can center it into the middle, so I know that this is sitting perfectly dead center in the middle of the page. Next thing I want to do is hide these frame edges. So I just want to see what my page looks like. I don't want to see these guides. I don't want to see the frame edges. So I'm going to go up to the View, Extras, Hide Frame Edges, and that's going to turn that off. So now that I can just see how that sits, if I need to see it again, I can just hover over it, or if I click it, it will show me the full frame edges. Click out the nice clean page, and that's looking pretty good. Now remember, relative to what the theme is you're going to work with, you might not want to be this clean. Clear architectural crisp style, you might want to be more graphic, you might want to put more watercolor, you might want a book style, you might want to be evocative narrative, or whatever it is. Your cover page should give you an insight of what that might be from the start. So it should be emblematic of that. Alright, so I'm sticking with the architectural crisp and clear for now. So let's move on and come over to our pages and hold Alt. I'm going to drag one page there so that we can see that's copied. That over to the cover page sitting up here. Half a page here, and I want a full spread there, so I'm going to hold Alt again and drag it over to the side. That gives us a full spread, and this is my contents page. I'll probably put an image over here later, but for now I'm just going to delete that and leave that one. We've got our text already set up for this here, so I just want to change this to contents and then use this one down here, design, hold, control, and move this to give me a little bit more room, whatever that might be. Site analysis, initial reading, urban acupuncture, iterations, process, models, whatever. Then I go to methods and case study, analysis, first drawing set, sketches, diagrams, perspectives, whatever. And so we have our contents which sit here, and once we have done all of that, bring our frame edge back in, and then we can just make sure we're sitting nice and centered there. So if we drag that up, hover it in pink, and pink, now that it's sitting in the center of the page now, we have our contents page once again, should be emblematic of the type of theme you're looking at. So have a look at some of the other examples of what style you might want. So I've got my spread here to page 2 and 3. If I hold down shift, I can click both. Then I want to hold alt again and drag. Copy. So now I have another spread here, and I don't actually want a contents page right now, so I'm going to delete that. I want to have a full bleed image and some white space. That's going to be my consistent graphic pattern for my folio. Big white, so big full bleed imagery over on the right and white space on the left. So let's do that. I'm going to go back into here and remember I want my PSD on the original Photoshop file, so that way I can live edit whatever's changing, whatever changes that I make in Photoshop file, and that's going to be live edited in here, so I can drag and drop that in now. InDesign is quite clever in what we use as our frame edges as a tool. So say for example, if we zoom into here, let's just look at this one page for now. By the way, if we go over to View, Design, Performance, we can control that, what this image looks like. So if I change it to fast display, for example, it just gives us the outer shapes. If I go to typical display, then it has a blurred image, but if I go to high quality display, it's going to do the full resolution of the image. So depending on the speed of your laptop, you might need to turn it down a bit for either fast display or typical. I like to run in high def all the time because I can see what it's going to look like back into our frame edges. So you'll notice that when we click on our image, if we were to grab the frame edges and bring them in, it doesn't actually resize. What it does is crop the image down to a particular point. So that's quite a powerful tool, because as you can see here, I've created a nice horizontal band image, almost like a widescreen image from my perspective down there, just by grabbing the frames. If I pull that back out again, we've got a nicer clear. Instead of double clicking inside to bring, it brings up a red frame, and now we can see a maroon frame. If I were to resize, we can see that it is actually changing the size of the image. Same as Photoshop and Illustrator, you want to hold down the shift to make sure you're resizing proportionally so it doesn't get warped. Alright, so instead of actually I want to resize the whole thing and change the frame edges at the same time, we want to click, make sure the blue frame, hold Control and Shift, and that's going to both resize and change the location of the frame edge. A lot of the time we're going to want to resize it from the center. So for example, if we want to resize and make it smaller, keeping our frame edge coming in so that we can bring it in and make a copy, then have side by side or something like that, we can do that by holding Control Shift and then press Alt. That's going to bring it in with both the resize and frame edge. If we want to resize out, what I'm going to do so I can have a full bleed image is Control Shift Alt for pulling outwards instead of inwards. We can see my page border is now going outside of the edge of the sheet, which is what we want. I can also use the frame edges. InDesign is very clever enough to automatically stop me by turning it green when I get to the edges. There, so it goes green now. And that's a beautiful full bleed image inside there. So I want to have a full bleed image, and next to it a bit of white space for this perspective. It's important to talk about a narrative that I've tried to create through my post-digital drawings. So I'm going to take that contents page text that we had there, but I don't want the big title. That's only for the large titles of the cover page and the contents page. So I'm just moving over this to smaller text, jump into here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to say Surrealism on a Sunday is the title of the perspective that I made, and I'm going to go over my text there. Just going to jump over into the Properties tab, and I'm going to click Fill with Placeholder Text, and you'll see that that's put some of the text under. There, I can delete this one out now, and it's already copied that style that we're in the Futura light, and we bring it down to 12 points. You can also do it down as small as 9 point. You want it to be as nice and small to focus on the architecture. So now that's already grabbed that style there, it's time to fill in with some text, and I'm just going to leave it like this, so when I'm ready to come back I'll do that later. It looks kind of nice. I'll bring my frame edges in so that it's bounded with that title. So you'll see here that it'll automatically make it fill out to the edges, and which look nice. But we'll talk a little bit more about grids a little bit later. But lining up that text edge with the title here is really good. It brings the text to our frame edge nice and tight, and make sure it's sitting where we want to sit on the page, the dead center. Now we have a beautiful master spread, got full bleed on one side and white space on the other. So let's copy that over, and we're happy that with that style of spread. So again, we'll hold down Alt on our pages, copy that in. I now want to create an architectural drawing full bleed on this side, and some black and white architectural drawing spreads over the other side of the page on this side. So even though this is white space, because we're dealing with black and white grey in our lines work on our architectural drawings, it is still read as white against a full bleed image, even if we add the architectural joints in. So let's grab some of our diagrams, or some of the diagrams that I have saved here, and we'll create one that is full bleed. Now I'm just going to drag and copy the same pages down. You can also select both pages and right click and duplicate spread. That can give you the same. Okay, and just like this perspective does here, it still feels like it's taking over the whole page, and we can see it's still working nicely with the white text. And we had an important note that we're using scale bars instead of scale in our portfolio, because we're going to be resizing a lot and moving things around to make sure that they fit, instead of just trying to be an awkward scale, like one is at 16 or one is at 242 or other such nonsense. Just create a scale bar, so when you're in CAD, or if you did in Illustrator and you want to have a relative scale, so this is 0 to 10 meters, then we know it doesn't matter how more we take this thing that is going to be from 0 to 10 meters. It's the scale bar. So much more effective for portfolio design. So alright, we're happy with how that's sitting on the page now. So now I'm going to bring in the diagrams on this side, which shows a lot of white space still, but it explains the concept and content in this design. These type of axos and final line work and hatching saves us some time. I'm going to take the hatching of these drawings, so you know that I'm representing here. Make sure that they're nice and evenly spread and that they look nice next to this section. I'm going to add a little annotation, one to each of these. So we're going to need some guidelines to set out our first. Let's add a piece of text. So I want this one to be called divided massing. So now you see, again, we just double check our text to make sure that it's correct. So we need to change that to light, and then I want to make it a 12 point. Maybe we bring it down to 9 points. So it's outside our titles. It's just a little description. Okay, and then I'll just press click out of it, Then click the arrow selection tool. Control V is a good shortcut. You just pull it in the bounding boxes close to the text. Now we're going to position it nice and evenly below this diagram. So I'm going to use the guidelines, and that is just by clicking the rulers on the side and up the top. And you'll just drag out a guideline, and it'll help you position and center it with the right, the relevant image that you're doing above. So dragging the ruler, you can use the guide, and you see it's automatic. It turns the guide back on, which is Command colon before we want to do anything. We use our grids and guides, and they'll lock in the moment, and they unlock them when you want to unlock your guides. You copy them and move them around. So I want one in the corner, and I want to hold Alt just to the edge of my text, and then I'm going to click both of them just to make sure that they're even. Then I'm going to pull down the top one and create my guides horizontally. If you're careful and you're using your guides, then you're going to be able to have this text looking much neater and tidier, because it'll be all positioned around the same spaces on your panel. I'm going to select both these guidelines and then just drag a copy down below, holding the Alt and positioning it right below these axons. Now I'm going to set up the text and copy paste, hold the Shift key to make sure that they're aligned nice. Give this drawing a title. Once I'm happy with them two titles, I will select both and then copy and drag down that into position, meeting up with the guidelines. So everything is perfectly aligned, and the drawings, the touches and the texts are in the same position relative to the drawing. For each one of these, if we turn this off, we can see that it really makes it beautiful and clear on the page. We really looks nice. When we zoom out as part of the spreads here, we can see that the full bleed and then the white space are working very well in terms of harmony and in terms of consistency of the graphic narrative that we have here. Okay, so let's say we've got a couple of these consistent layouts, this pattern, full bleed versus white space every now and then. It's good to break it up, and usually the way that we do it is by a banding technique. So let's create a new spread. What I want to do is create some banding images that we have in here. So first we want to do is delete all of this stuff out, and I'm going to just create a series of images that sit inside here. And again, InDesign is very powerful at doing this. So let's get into selecting some of these images, and we want to create some panels across the page. You can see in the property toolbar that we have this square, and you can adjust the width and height. So this gives you a little bit more control over what you want to do. You can use the grid of the square to create reference points. So that means if I change anything here, let's say for example that to go for 50, it's going to do essentially everything that had left hand side. We can create a perfectly equal square, but in this case I'm going to have a panel so a bit longer higher in height. So once you've got the right proportion that you want to use, then you'll select it and you'll just drag copies of it across. See, InDesign creates these little green arrows to lock it in to show that it's equal. And then you can use the select tool to just move around all the different views in one by selecting all of them. And then you can just drag in your other images in place. See how this one has kind of shown up a little bit different? It's because the yeah, the cropping tool. So we're just going to adjust this by stretching it out a bit higher, and there we go. So that's what's great about these, the blue border, because like you can move around and crop your images. So now we're going to add in some text, and we're just going to drag it down and center it into the middle of this image. Then we can select it all and just hold Alt in and drag it to the other side, and that creates a full spread of banding, which can be a really nice way to break up the consistency of white space and full bleed. Comes a really nice collection. Now here I'm just going to show an example of how to drop in a PDS file again, and how you can edit it by splitting up the PSD file and saving the different view over 2 different sheets. So just going to adjust the bounding box to suit the sheet size, get it the right proportion, crop it. Now that we've got our PSD at a nice size and fitting the sheet properly, we will select it, hold Alt down and drop in a copy. This will pick up on another view that I have saved in the Photoshop file. So you can really just have like multiple different angles of the PSD file that you're working with. Okay, so finally I just want to show a good example of using this technique again with the multiple views and having it nicely spread out across the page. But we want to use a form of hierarchy now. So we'll find multiple images. These sheets, adjust some of the bounding boxes if we want them to be more square. And clicking onto the blue guide and just using the pink line to make sure that they're nice and equal. Select them all, drag them up into the center of the page. You have them selected? Yep, okay, that fits perfectly. Now I'm going to grab my images and just drop them in to the file. This is all of master project. And you can see that this warning sign pops up. This will affect links as well. See how some of these files are saved on iCloud. They need to be saved local on your computer in order for them to be able to be used properly. So I've just made sure that they're saved onto my computer, drop them in, and now we've got a jumble of images that we're going to sort out and spread out onto this sheet nice and neat. I'm going to take this text box and copy and paste one down here to help describe some of the program in this project that I have. So I'm just going to select them all and then resize them and shrink them down a little bit so they're easier to work with. Okay, and I'm going to put the guidelines back on just to make sure that my layouts are working nice and evenly across the page. Here I've got the plan. I'm going to put the little description below it. I really like this section. I think that explains the most in this complex site, so I'm going to have that as like the hero shot at the bottom of the sheet running across it. And I think these little call outs with the plan and my perspectives are really a good way to explain the intent of this concept clearly. So just going to shrink down and play around with the bounding box and the crop tool to make sure that everything is nice and aligned and equal across the page. So once I've got the images sorted, then I'll add some text just by copying and pasting and dragging them over. And I think that looks really good. That's another template, another layout. You can drag down the guidelines just to double check if the text is not perfectly aligned. Just a good way just to double check. I think finally you want to go back through and check your spelling. I think it's really important. Also just turning off the guides to make sure you can see what it actually is going to look like. Yeah, I think it looks nice and clean. Very happy with it. So these are the links, and it's really important if you have any errors like these little red ones, that means that when you export it to PDF and you do printing, the images are going to be very pixelated, and the PDF, like once you print it out on paper, so it's going to look terrible. To avoid that, just need to double check that the file hasn't moved, or bring it back into the correct folder that you brought in the drawing, and it will reload and refresh, and it will be able to print much clearer. It's the same as the iCloud, where you could see a lot of my files have been saved to iCloud, so you just got to try and make sure that they're locally saved on the computer. And then, as you can see, going to File and pressing Check Spelling, there's two different ways that you can do this. This one you can go through and it will adjust any spelling if you've got words that aren't typically made from English, or you want to make sure that you can modify it. So, I really like just the standard one. You can have the red line showing up to show you exactly where the spelling is. So once our links are all done and our spell checking is done, and we're happy with the visual narrative that's there, it's showing all of our work from across the semester, everything is nice and consistent, the layouts working really well, we go to File, Document, and High Quality Print. We're going to call it InDesign Portfolio Test, and then save it, and we're going to bring it up. It's going to bring up a dialog here. Only one we really need to look at is compression. So if you're finding you have a massive file and you can't upload it, you can bring these ones down here to 450, bring those ones down to 300, and it'll do further compression to your file. But InDesign is automatically going to compress anyway, so you can either export as pages or spreads. It's up to you. I personally like to have spreads in mine, but it's going to show up how you want it to it as well. So if you didn't do spreads but you want spreads later, I'll show you how to do that. So let's just do it for pages now. Export, and you will see that InDesign is going to go doing our little background task at the moment. Once that's finished, that'll go away. I can go in there and find the document, which I just did in Design Folio Test, and that's looking very, very sharp. As we can see there, we've got our contents page, it's Realism on Sunday, everything is looking really nice and laid out and consistent. So I want to see a 2-up spread though. This is pages, but it's also the same as Adobe when you're using Adobe Reader. So to see the 2 pages view, go to View and 2 pages, and there we go. You can see the entire spread side by side, and everything's looking great. You can have a quick check and see how it goes and how we can see it's looking lovely. That's how we create a beautiful architectural portfolio using InDesign. That's all for now, and I'll be talking to you very shortly. Thanks.